Hello, and welcome back to This Month on the Railroad, my monthly video series covering the major rail-related news in North America. Let's get right into it. On the last day of September, train service was suspended on parts of the Surfline between Los Angeles and San Diego, California, after tracks in San Clemente were deemed unsafe for trains. Seeing as these tracks run right alongside the beach, it's not terribly surprising that this is happening, but unfortunately, as of right now, it's possible that service won't return until as late as January. Staying in California, on the next day, BNSF announced its plans to construct a $1.5 billion intermodal yard in Barstow, California. With Barstow already being one of the largest yards in the state, this addition will make it one of the largest in the country, now handling container traffic in and out of Los Angeles. On the 2nd, New Jersey Transit GP40PH-2 number 4101 was refurbished to its former New Jersey Department of Transportation Bluebird paint scheme, receiving a fresh new paint job and a period-correct horn. 4101 now joins 4109, which wears the CNJ paint scheme these locomotives were originally delivered in. Not only are these engines heritage units, but also incredibly accurate restorations of some of NJT's oldest engines. Major props to those who made this project possible. I wish the MBTA could do something like this. On the 5th, Brightline West acquired land for its future station in Rancho Cucamonga, California, where it'll connect to existing Metrolink commuter trains. This rendering was released depicting what appears to be a Siemens Velaro train set painted in a similar paint scheme to Brightline's existing trains in Florida. In the late morning of the 6th, the CSX executive train departed Chicago for a tour of western Ohio and Michigan with CSX's new CEO, Joseph Hinrichs, a former executive at Ford. Added to the consist was CSX-T 994319, the most recently refurbished car on the train. This car, now painted in B&O heritage colors, was named after Robert R. Young, a 20th century railroad executive who led the C&O and New York Central through World War II. Prior to its recent return to the OCS train, the 319 had been seen operating in late 2016 as a diner car, though in the process of being overhauled, it was converted to a sleeper car with 4-bedroom suites and larger windows. On the same day, Union Pacific announced its order of 6 new ZTR hybrid battery electric locomotives for use in yards. The first of these new engines will be delivered in late 2023, with 5 coming in the following year. Right now it's yet to be determined what these locomotives will look like, but we do know that they'll operate in conjunction with diesel locomotives to provide regenerative braking for yard switchers. A few days later, on the 11th, Metra unveiled its first SD70 MACH in Chicago. Not only was it the first SD70 delivered to Metra, but it was also painted in RTA heritage colors, otherwise known as the railroad that preceded Metra in the 80s. F40PH number 100 wore a temporary RTA wrap in 2017 and 18, however SD70 MACH number 500 features a permanent heritage paint job. 500 will begin testing on Metra in the near future, eventually entering service in mid-2023. The next day, one of CSX's new Zombie SD40s, otherwise known as an ET23, was seen moving around with its original cab but modified radiators. This new rebuild is technically classified as a GEVO, but it retains its original EMD cab from the 70s. CSX will be rebuilding 13 SD40s to the ET23 class over the year, replacing the original EMD V16s with GE inline 6s. 3 days later, after almost a year of no service, Amtrak brought back its Silver Meteor between New York and Miami. 2 days later, Salt Lake City's FrontRunner announced the sale of its remaining Comet Cars in order to receive a federal grant for new ones. These aging cars will likely be sold for ridiculously cheap, however the cost of removing them from FrontRunner property will be anything but that. 2 days later, following the resumption of Amtrak's Silver Meteor, the final remaining suspended route, the Adirondack, made some progress towards resuming service, with test trains operating in Montreal to requalify crews. While no official return date has been announced yet, it's clear that Amtrak intends to bring back the Adirondack in the near future. 2 days later, in the fallout of Hurricane Ian, it was found that the Seminole Gulf Railway's Arcadia line needed $28 million in repairs, with washed-out bridges and unstable rail beds. Luckily, the Seminole Gulf is on track to fix its line in the coming months, but it certainly is unfortunate that it was damaged in the first place. Keeping with the theme of new construction, on the same day, the California High-Speed Rail Authority awarded contracts for the official design of Fresno, Merced, Hanford, and Bakersfield stations, thus continuing the process of building the Central Valley segment of California High-Speed Rail. Once again, not a major breakthrough, but proof that the California High-Speed Rail project continues to make progress. Speaking of progress, 2 days later, Amtrak took a step back in time, returning a previously retired HHP-8 electric locomotive to service. While of course it wasn't used as motive power, locomotive number 691, now renumbered to 90691, was gutted of its electrical components and converted to a non-powered control unit. Rumor has it that this HHP-8 shell will be used as a control car on the Ethan Allen Express, with Amtrak's 14 other units likely receiving the same treatment. The same day, the San Bernardino County Transportation Authority began operating its new Aero Commuter Rail service between San Bernardino and Redlands, California. Using state-of-the-art Stadler Flirt diesel multiple units, the Aero is America's newest commuter rail, and an interesting one at that. With plans to test hydrogen fuel cell trains in the near future, Aero is bound to stay relevant in U.S. rail modernization news quite a bit, despite its small size. The next day, the MTA increased its order of Kawasaki R211 subway cars from 535 to 1,175. This massive fleet of almost 1,200 cars will become the new face of the New York subway over the course of the next decade, with the first cars set to enter service in less than a year from now. The next day, an Amtrak train was spotted with not 2, but 3 ACS-64s all under power. Of course, triple headers on long-distance routes aren't too rare, but I can't recall a single time in history when this has happened on an electrified Amtrak train. Finally, on the 28th, the state of Pennsylvania granted $3.7 million in funding to Amtrak in order to replace ties on the future New York to Scranton route. While $3.7 million is a relatively small investment in terms of infrastructure projects, this is a massive step in the right direction for this project, showing Pennsylvania's intentions to get it done in the near future. Anyways, that's all for the general railroad news this month, but we aren't done yet. Joining us now is Maine Railfan with a deep dive into the various news stories from the great state of Maine this month.
My name is Maine Railfan. I've been asked to cover the railroad news from Maine due to the number of developments this month. To begin, on the 1st, it was announced that the Pixel Specialty Solutions paper mill in Jay, Maine will be closing in the spring of 2023. Production at the mill has been steadily cut back for the past 10 years, but a massive explosion in the pulp digester at the mill in 2020 shut down the pulp side of the plant. Since then, pulp has been brought in via rail and road from a mill in Baileyville, Maine, while production has been scaled back significantly. There has been no word if the mill will be sold or scrapped, but given the state of the facility even before the explosion, the future doesn't look good. Currently, the mill takes 20 to 30 cars a day and is one of the largest customers on the former Pan Am system. The same week, MBM Railways finalized plans to acquire the Canadian Pacific Millinocket sub, which runs from Brownville to Millinocket, Maine. This transaction also includes the Millinocket and East Millinocket branches that run to the namesake towns. The line was acquired in 2020 as part of the purchase of the Central Maine, Quebec by Canadian Pacific. MBM Railway subsidiary Maine Northern has had trackage rights over the subdivision for the past 10 years, all the way back into the Montreal, Maine and Atlantic era. CP stopped serving customers in 2021 on the line, while Maine Northern continued to operate the line via trackage rights. As part of the deal, the Eastern Maine Railway will be taking ownership of the line, as well as getting trackage rights on the Bangor sub between Brownville and Brownville Junction, Maine, as well as several miles onto the CP Moosehead sub. Once the deal is approved by the STB at the beginning of next month, the line will become part of the Eastern Maine Railway. MBM intends on serving the current customers that CP has refused service to, as well as attracting new businesses to the area and upgrading the subdivision back to 25 miles an hour. As part of that announcement, it was announced that MBM would also be building a 10,000-foot siding east of Brownville Junction in an area known as Knights. The siding is expected to be completed in the next month or so and will be used to ease congestion in Brownville Junction, which is the interchange point between the Eastern Maine Railway and Canadian Pacific Rail. With the increase of container traffic at the Port of St. John, 2 new container trains have been added on Canadian Pacific and MBM. These are trains 120 and 121. This is the first step in the eventual plan to run 12 trains a day between Brownville Junction and St. John, New Brunswick, over the next 2 years. To accommodate this traffic, MBM has begun doing large amounts of infrastructure work this month. They have 3 of their own tie gangs, as well as a contract gang working currently. The goal is to complete major tie and surfacing work on the St. Stephen sub, which runs from McAdam to St. Stephen, New Brunswick, the Woodland Spur, which runs from Calais to Woodland, Maine, the Mattawamkeag sub, which runs from McAdam to Brownville Junction, as well as the Madawaska sub, which runs from Millinocket to Madawaska, Maine. To handle the increase in traffic, MBM has purchased 6 GP40-2s. 3 XNS1s are coming from PRLX and are being rebuilt at CAD in Montreal. The remaining 3 are ex-CSX GP40-2s that were purchased directly from CSX. These units, as well as a former GP30 Slug, are being rebuilt at the Ontario Northland shops on the Ontario Northland Railway. These units are expected to enter service in early next year, as NBM intends on returning all lease power that is currently on the roster. 12 XNS SD70 M-2s have also been acquired, which will bring the total on roster to 18, along with a parts unit. Currently, 3 are undergoing rebuild, and the remaining 9 will also be slated for rebuild over the next year. As part of the rebuild, the units will have major mechanical upgrades done, as well as sound deadening added to the cabs. In the meantime, 2 XNS SD60Ms have been leased from PRLX to ease the power shortage, as well as an ex-CSX GP38-2 slug set. Overall, it's really nice to see a short line remain independent and thrive when others in the area are being taken over. On the 12th, the Finger Lakes Railway subsidiary, Midcoast Railserv, received its first train of petroleum coke for Dragon cement. Dragon has been using other fuel sources since the early 90s, but recently decided to switch back to pet coke. FGLK recently took over the Rockland branch from Canadian Pacific, who currently holds the lease from the Maine Department of Transportation. CP acquired the lease in 2020 as part of the CMQ takeover. Like most of the branch lines acquired in the sale, CP has little interest in attracting new business or maintaining current customers. So the line was subcontracted out to FGLK in 2022, and FGLK has stepped up big time. The railroad intends on moving close to 50,000 carloads of cement per year from Dragon, in addition to the current contracts. Other new forms of business which developed this month on the line came in the form of reefers of fish waste. These cars are unloaded at Rockland and are used by a local processing plant as lobster bait. A new steel company in Bath, Maine also took its first car the week of the 28th. Company, ASA, will be unloading cars of steel for Bath Iron Works, a large shipbuilding company, as well as taking carloads of steel for themselves. Business on the line has increased so much that FGLK has dispatched another B-23-7, number 2310, to the operation. Also on the 12th, CP announced that the holiday train would be returning after a 2-year hiatus, with 3 stops planned on the main side of the former CMQ network and 3 in Quebec, including a stop at Lac-Mégantic. This is the first time the train has ventured onto the former CMQ network. Throughout the entire month, CSX has been unloading new ties on the northern Maine junction to Mattawamkeag portion of the main line in Maine. The intent is to get the main line open for road jobs by November 1st, since CP is ending a CMQ-era haulage agreement. This agreement allowed Pan Am to send traffic to Brownville Junction, where it could be interchanged with MBM Railways after a derailment closed the main line east of Old Town to road jobs in 2019. 70,000 ties as well as ballast are being installed hopefully before winter. However, as of the 28th, the work still has not begun besides laying out material. Currently the line is passable, but 6-axle motive power is banned from operating east of Old Town due to light rail in the area. At the same time, CSX has also begun installing defect detectors and AEI scanners between Mattawamkeag and Waterville, Maine. All of this work is in preparation for future intermodal traffic, which will be an attempt to compete with CP in the future. Throughout the month, CSX has continued to scrap former Pan Am rolling stock, which has been stored for years at Waterville. Many former Maine Central and Boston and Maine boxcars and hoppers have been sold to a local scrap company. It is rumored that between 180 and 200 cars will be cut up, many of which only have minor defects, but since they are only a few years away from the 45-year age restriction, CSX has opted to not repair them. Finally, in the early morning hours of the 16th, CP train G16 encountered a washout in Orneville Township, Maine, which is just south of Milo, Maine. 3 units and 6 cars derailed. 4 of the cars were loaded tar cars, which broke open during the derailment and leaked into a nearby swamp. Since then, the derailment has been cleaned up and the track has been repaired. The 3 locomotives, the Canadian Pacific 2262, 2279, and 2257, all GP20 Ecos, sustained heavy damage during the derailment and are currently stored at Brownville Junction, and all 3 are heavily damaged and will take some time before they are moved to a shop. Normally Maine isn't this noteworthy, but recent buyouts as well as the expansion of the port of St. John, have made the area increasingly busy, which will hopefully continue to increase as time goes by.
Well, there you go. That was all the news from Maine this month. Thanks again to Maine Railfan for that update. Make sure to check out his channel in the description. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon in another video.